Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Tuesday nights. That means there's a Talk Openly Lions Roar Dharma Center's little podcast we got going here. I'm Jack. I'm here with my wonderful friend Daniel. Hey, Daniel.
Hey buddy, how you doing?
Yeah, a little, it's a little rough. It's
Yeah.
a little
Aw.
rough out there.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I see. It's when all you had to say was the out there part.
out there, the out there part. Yeah, in here, I'm okay-ish. It's a little numb, I think. Um, I don't want to numb out, but it's kind of where I'm at a little bit with all the political stuff. Um, but life wise, I'm good. Keeps
Like you're
going.
you're healthy, right? You're still
Healthy.
breathing. Work's all
Hmm.
right.
Yeah, I have a place to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
People who love you and care about you.
exactly. Yeah, I've got
Yeah,
the foundations. Yeah,
and you have a cat.
I have a cat. Yeah. But at the same time, we're going to be talking about the suffering of change tonight. Um, so not to be a downer, but those things do change. Not always, not, hopefully I always have a place to live, right? But I am going to die. So that's one way that it changes. Um, and yeah, our fortunate conditions often do change. And then also just the suffering of the things that we think will bring us happiness and then they don't, or it's just
Right.
limited happiness. Um, So we are going to be talking about the suffering of change tonight and what that means, how to work with it. So yeah, I think it's going to be a necessary show for me tonight.
Yeah, hell yeah, for sure. I feel you. I was thinking about it this suffering of change and how like it's at all levels, right? Like it's both at the very sort of like it's present all the time, right? And sometimes like yeah, we can talk about it. Oh, yeah, my loved everyone I know and care about is gonna die, and so am I, right? And okay, yeah, there's that, but I mean, it's also just like kind of moment to moment, right? Like
Yeah.
there's oftentimes just like, a shift. Like sometimes it's actually sort of interesting how it's like we don't even know that we're enjoying something or that something is sort of like good, and then all of a sudden there's the change and then we recognize,
Yeah.
oh my God, like actually what was good and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, just kind of totally taking things for granted.
Oh,
Um like I think that's, a lot of the folks I work with are elderly. And so much of what I hear is like, I didn't know that it was gonna be like this, like that aging would bring this. I didn't know that I was gonna age, right? That's
aw,
basically the sentiment, right? And
right.
so really like missing their bodies, right? Missing their kind of how they imagine themselves in their mind, which is like their 35-year-old self, and it's like, yeah, body kind of like
I know,
doing its
right?
thing, peak, and then it changes. So
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. Hey, give me just 1 second. I gotta yell really loud. Someone's
yell
knocking on
really
the door and I
loud.
want them to go away. Hang on.
Take a sip of my bubbly water. Suffering of change with bubbly water is that eventually it's going to be gone. That's a bummer. And it's also just not that great. For those just listening, there's a Daniel hollering.
There we go. There's construction going on. You can see I'm like kind of red. I'm blushing that I was yelling so. Yeah, no, there's we're doing some construction on the house and
Oh,
didn't expect a concrete guy to be showing up in late in the evening unannounced to drop off some tools.
no, no, not at 7 at night.
Like, all right, bro, like go away. Like
That's really funny.
I wasn't expecting you right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm
yeah,
glad that he dropped off the stuff.
I don't know if he did or did it. We'll see. I
oh,
told him he'd go for it.
is this a house you're renting too?
No, no, no. My partner owns the house. She's adding
Oh,
an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, converting the
nice.
garage into a living space.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it did lead to some unannounced visitors tonight. And of
Right.
course that sets the dogs off and it, hang on,
Yeah.
hang on, hang on.
Yeah. I do think that this is like a good example. This is a little aside. Well, Daniel has to go. This is an example of the suffering of change in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
The suffering of change, right? That, here we are just kind of
Yeah,
engaging in a nice
right.
conversation. And then out of the blue, there's like a big, whammy, got to deal with some stuff. Got to go yell.
Right, right. And I'm like, man, there's other people in the house. Come on, somebody do it.
Right?
Jesus, the guy's talking to me through the window.
That's so funny. Oh
But
my God.
I think it's resolved now. I told him just like, come in, just do it. Do what you need
Yeah.
to do. So hopefully we're good on that front. But
Good, 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 good.
yeah,
Hey,
we will have. Well, that's what I was saying though, right? Like this change is it's constant, right?
constant.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
we
I
don't
don't
know
think
how it's gonna change too.
that's true. And you did say, not to be a downer, but we're gonna be talking about this. It's also an upper. So,
True.
I'm just, like it cuts both
I mean,
ways.
the suffering of change, I think, is specifically talking about attachment, right? Because it's the suffering. Change in permanence is can be like an upper, right? Because it's like, okay, things can change in a way where it's like, oh, I'm on the path and I'm developing and all of that. Or like, hey, I won the lottery or whatever it is, it can
Yeah.
be conventional too. But like, I think the suffering of change is specifically about the suffering of attachment.
Truly,
Um,
truly it is. And yet, on a positive note, when we feel that suffering of change, right, and we become more familiar with change and the source of that suffering and the nature of, this existence, then we might start to look around for something that maybe is a more lasting source of happiness.
yeah, that's yes, if we're a good Lojong practitioner. Take
True.
everything as an opportunity, right?
Truly, truly.
Yeah. Well, how are you doing? What's your world like? What's your training? What's been
I
going on?
think, yeah, my goodness. So my world it's interesting. My world's a little chaotic, but my practice, my training is both training practice going incredibly well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I am having this great experience of extending my sits, just increasing just the length of time, the amount of time, the number of times that I'm sitting, and it's fantastic. I'm so pleased that Lama recommended that and that I've been able to take his advice. Super duper helpful. And I noticed that the post meditation period the clarity, right? The settling of the mind lasts much, much, much longer. It takes longer for it to get perturbed again, which is really a blessing.
Yeah.
And along with that, it's really interesting, right? Because that's just shamatha, calm abiding meditation. And only recently have I begun to get sort of glimpses of how Vipassana is an aspect of this as well, right? Like where I actually am using the calm, clear mind in order to sort of better understand the nature of both, of mind and
That's
of
it.
one's truths, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
just now beginning a little where I'm like, oh wow, I'm actually sitting with this and I'm seeing this and it's really fascinating how we can hear the same stuff. Like we have heard amazing teachings that could have liberated us already, right?
Yeah.
Like we already have. They hit our ears, right? And it actually, like, we were there, it was there, it happened, but we weren't ripe enough or whatever. There were too many obscurations, or whatever. Something was going on and we didn't hear it, didn't get it. I've had for a long time, I've really tried to like understand the, dependent origination, like what this wheel of samsara, like, well, how did it start? How does it go? And no matter how many times I've heard and tried to understand it, I always am kind of like, well, that first link, I don't quite get it. I don't get that first link, right? And then it was really fascinating. I went to Geshe Damsho's teaching on Thursday, Lamp on the Path of Liberation or something like that, I believe is the text that he was teaching on. And he just sort of mentions casually, like he says, something to the effect of how conceptualization is what gives rise to the first link is the first link, right, in
Mm,
dependent origination. And, I'm sure I've heard that a million times, right? And yet something, just this, his simple statement combined with, extended sitting and looking deeper into it, it became a lot more clear to me, like what was going on there. I was, yeah, it was amazing. It still
mm,
is, it's cool to watch these things sort of like, it's one thing to get it sort of intellectually, but once it kind of settles in and you kind of get it all, you're like, oh, wow, that's different. It's
yeah.
different.
Interesting. I thought, and it, for some reason, I thought ignorance was the first link.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Same.
Is it just kind of, it's like,
Right.
those are kind of used in the same way?
Yeah, so ignorance is this so you have ignorant, what is it? Ignorant of what, right? And so
Hmm.
what happens is our initial conceptual framework creates these misunderstandings, if you will, about permanence and impermanence and all of that, right? And
Hmm.
then we start moving as if, things were other than what they are, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It is ignorance, right? But what it's that conceptualization and where we get attached to the concepts initially. Right?
Right. Cool.
Yeah, very cool.
That's great that it clicked.
Yeah, yeah. Heck, I don't know if it's right or not, but it felt like something. And then, what was really cool, my nephew, he just got finished with a 3-month retreat at Tassajara.
Oh.
Yeah, and he came by for a visit yesterday. And so first we went to the temple and meditated for a while. And then we just walked around Sacramento, and the entire discussion was like we were together for hours and hours walking around and talking just all kinds about Dharma experiences and shared
Mm,
connections and oh, it was fantastic. It was so wonderful to have a relative who is sort of steeped in the Dharma as well, because
yeah.
I don't have anybody else that I know of who's like that, right? Who's a relative, like a blood relative, right? Who's
Right.
engaged in the same sort of practices. He's more drawn to Zen, but at the same time, there's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely.
He-
That's so cool.
he's headed to Green Gulch next for another 3 month.
Wow.
Yeah,
He's hitting all the centers and kind of doing a Dharma bum
he's a Dharma
little trip.
bum. He's a Dharma bum. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Good for
I'm
him.
so
How
jealous.
how old is he?
What is he? 23?
Nice.
It's
Good for
around there.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, to be 23 and like,
Oh my gosh, right?
yeah, just on the road. That sounds
To be
fun.
23 and to have my shit together enough to be a Dharma bum would have been awesome.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. Keep us posted on your nephew. Sounds like a
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
dude.
for sure, for sure.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, glad to hear about your practice. It sounds like uh yeah, shamatha it, I feel like there's a way that when I first came to the temple, came to Dharma, I thought that shamatha was like it, right? That like just calm
Yeah.
abiding was it. Um and so like learning how to focus, learning how to turn my attention towards an object, but I didn't really make the connection that, well, the object is emptiness, right? The object is what we're trying to, come to conclusion about the nature of reality. And so that's the Vipassana piece that, our calm abiding is really for the purpose of staying with that recognition, staying with that learning, that kind of like making it an embodying learning,
Mhm.
or knowing. So yeah, that's really cool. How exciting.
Yeah, yeah, very much. I feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, good. I'm okay. In terms of my training, um, it kind of just goes. I've been very distracted lately. And in some ways, like, man, my mind, where I'll just catch myself like, wow, I've been off for like minutes, minutes at a time. And so I've been really just focusing on the basics of nope, mindfulness. We're staying with the breath. And so um, I've been reading instructions on shamatha through uh, um, Tsongkhapa's Lamrim. And I really like the metaphor of being like an elephant tamer. And so the way you tame the elephant, the mind, is by using mindfulness as the rope. Um, and the post that you tie the elephant to is the object. And the object I've been using the most is the breath because I have a lot of excitement and kind of external, outward, kind of focus. And so that was recommended as um, one of the objects that's most helpful for people who have that kind of issue. So tying the mind to the post of the breath through the rope of mindfulness, and then using I forget the word, but it's some kind of like tool to poke the elephant, right? And that's vigilance. And so, continually checking up through the meditation, like, okay, what are we doing right now, right? Like, am I focused? Am I on top of it? Am I being mindful? That's kind of like kind of poking the mind a little bit.
Yeah,
So that's been a really helpful metaphor for me.
nice.
Especially that kind of, for whatever the reason, that phrase, like tie the mind, just like tie the mind to with mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
Tie it to the breath. I think that's what I'm realizing is that I actually, um, I need to get a little bit more tight in some ways. It's like I'm letting my mind, go off too much in excitement. And so there's a way, like, I have to make sure that I don't get tight in terms of like tension, because then that increases excitement, right?
Right.
But there does have to be like a tightening of awareness so that it's like, nope, nope, we're not going off into that thought right now. That thought has nothing to do with what we're doing. It's not important, right? Come back.
Hmm.
And so it almost feels like I'm a little bit of a beginner again with shamatha, which is fine.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, speaking of that, so you in the past at least, I thought you oftentimes used visualization, like you use visualizations in order to as your object, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And with that it's fixed, correct? Like it's a like imagine like just say like a image of Shakyamuni Buddha, right? And so it's
hmm
fixed, it's not moving, it's stable.
Right. Right.
That's that post compared to the breath, which has this flexibility, this movement to it, right? It's like one is like a steel post or something, and the other one's
Mm.
like a bamboo post a little bit. There's a little more sort of flex to it. And I was
Hmm.
wondering, like, what's your experience moving between the two of them?
It's really I feel like it's really just dependent. But my general experience has been that sometimes the image, the visual can increase my um excitement. Like it's almost like I don't know, I could get too like detail oriented where it's like, okay, let's look at, like this part of the robe or like, this
Mm,
detail of the clouds or whatever. Which is not really the point. It's not the purpose of doing the visualization. From what I've heard, the visualization is more so you're trying to, yes, there's a visual, but you're more so trying to get the felt sense of the deity or of your teacher
yeah.
in front of you, rather than like you can go into detail, but not if it's like you don't also have the element of um uh the felt sense, because it's not like just looking at an image in a museum or something where you're like kind of just looking it over. It's really more of a connected thing. So I think sometimes I can get off into territory that's not necessarily helpful. Whereas with the breath, it's kind of just like it's just constantly there. There's nothing for me to extrapolate on, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Right. Oh,
It's
it
just
does.
it's boring, right? And I
Yeah.
need it to be boring, actually. Like I need to be okay with being bored, and I'm
Yeah.
not. And so it's a good one for me.
Cool. And what do you see as the, if we're going to use the metaphor, so the rope of mindfulness, do you think that it do you think there's value in it being sometimes not like, like when you're training a dog, sometimes you use a short leash and then a little bit
Mm,
later you use, longer leash. And then at some point, maybe it's under like a verbal leash kind of control, right?
totally. Yeah,
Like, so what would you say that you like, you have like a 3 foot leash or 6 foot leash, retractable leash?
totally. Yeah, mine is definitely at a 3 foot leash right now. I got to
Mm.
keep it tight. Yeah. Um, and there are times like where I think I can listen up a little bit. Like there's, been times in my 7 years or whatever of practicing shamatha where I can get a little bit looser, and I'm not gonna be distracted.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason right now it's like gotta be just
Yeah.
like directly on it. It's interesting, right? The different like
Yeah.
phases.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like no joke, it's a lot like walking the dogs. Like sometimes like if my dogs are already relaxed and it's all easy going and there's no pressure to get back in a certain time or whatever, then it's longer leash, it's fine. But if they're all cooped up, highly energetic and I got somewhere to go or whatever, I gotta keep them like right close to me, right?
For
Otherwise it's gonna be
sure.
a whole lot of trouble. I'm not gonna meet my goal. So yeah, I think
Right,
it's
right.
we have to be that's where that little stick, right? To like make sure we stay on the elephant stays kind of on the path and gently sort of encourage it along, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's a good point too about what you said with your dogs is like if they're already relaxed, if they're already kind of like chill. And I think that's something that I've really needed to practice is like, am I coming prepared to sit, right? Have I, checked in with my body? Have I done some stretching or, maybe a little bit of yoga, something to help relax my body? And then also the
Prostrations are good for
prayers,
that.
prostrations. Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So is there some also kind of preparation that I'm doing
Yeah.
for the sit? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. Cool. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. I really appreciate it. On the
Yeah.
visualization aspect of it, yeah, I've very, very, very rarely attempted even to employ visualization when it comes
Oh,
to
okay. Mhm.
shamatha practice. Almost always, it's been almost exclusively breath.
Yeah.
Sometimes mantras, but still, that's a kind of like breath in a way.
Mhm.
And so just the other day, I was at the temple early morning, just sitting there, it's just me. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna use the big refuge Buddha statue, like I'm gonna use that as
Mm.
my visualization. I'm gonna do this. And it was gonna be a long sit too. So I was like, all right, I got this. And it was really interesting what I noticed for myself anyways. Like the reason I don't do it is that I find it very difficult to visualize anything at all, right? It's like it's
Mm.
not sort of like my dominant way of imagining, I suppose. And
Mm.
so I was having a really hard time and I was really frustrated. And so then I like backed off a little bit and just relaxed. I was like, it's too tight, you know?
Yeah.
So I just relaxed. And it was really interesting to observe how like so when I like before I could only like get little like you were saying, like I could only kind of like focus on one part at a time. It was like I couldn't sort of see the entire image. I could just like see
Yeah.
just the lips or just the hand or just this or just that. And then when I relaxed, the entire image came into view. So it was kind
Yeah.
of fun to notice how like, oh, right, tight, tight, too, oh, and there it is, just right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And we can only know like in our own body what that's gonna be like, which
Right.
is really cool. We
Yeah.
gotta know ourselves. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was fun. So I'm gonna do
Nice.
a little bit more of that. I thought it was really helpful. I think that where my mind state is, it could benefit from a solid post and a short tether.
Yeah,
And a
for
cattle
sure.
prod.
And a cat. Yeah, the prod.
Not just a little like stick, like
Yeah, that's what I need too, man. Well, hey, I feel like Mom Rim can be a pretty good cattle prod. What do you say?
I think it is an ideal cattle prod. Let's pull it up here. The RLS.
Or not Lam Rim, Lojong. I mean, they're very
Oh, dude,
related.
I knew what you meant so much. I heard what I wanted to hear.
I know, right? Random Lojong slogan generator.
All
Lions
right.
Road Dharma Center. Yeah.
Here we go.
Oh, great.
Oh, good.
This is a fun one. Okay, 21. Always have the support of a joyful mind. So Choyam Trungpa says, the point of this slogan is continuously to maintain joyful satisfaction. That means that every mishap is good because it is encouragement for you to practice the Dharma. Other people's mishaps are good also. You should share them and bring them into yourself as the continuity of their practice or discipline. So you should include that also. It is very nice to feel that way, actually.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. I have on my right where I meditate, I have this Atisha 7 points, and this is point number 6, right?
Hmm.
So about having a joyful mind, always having a joyful mind. And sometimes
Yeah.
when I'm meditating, I'll just kind of glance over and just I'll just pick up one point. Like so just like I'll sort of just look over and just like I let one of the points sort of hit me. And this is the same one as the one that hit me this morning when I was meditating. I was sitting there, and it was interesting to notice how just remembering that I want to have the support of a joyful mind relaxed even deeper, where there was this sort of feeling of like, oh, right. Right. Whatever's so serious, whatever's so like, whatever's got me, like, my suffering's not worth suffering for, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay. And then there's like this a little bit of relief, right? And I couldn't agree more about these mishaps. Like, we don't want them to happen. I don't want it to happen to you or anybody else or me, but observing it happening, seeing it happening, and sort of using that in my practice is really, really important to me. I had
Yeah.
just the other day, I don't know if I told you this story. Stop me if I told you this, but I was driving, taking my dogs to the river, and there was this terrible car accident. I saw a car
Uh,
running a red light. Did I already tell you this?
no.
That car runs the red light, hits this minivan just like mine, right?
Oh,
And oh man, it was a gnarly accident. And thankfully there were people like closer to it than me that were getting out and assisting. I was like, all right, I'm gonna allow it be. Normally I'd probably try to stop and insert myself somehow, but it didn't look like it was
yeah.
gonna be helpful. But but something about like that mishap, like it really affected me, where I was like reminded of impermanence. I was reminded like I mean, that was just some dude just like me who was just going about his day, right? And through no fault of his own, somebody else runs a red light and hits him, right? Like that's terrible, but man, this is really important for me to remember that this is our life. This is what life is like here, right? It's impermanent. And then we get down to the river. We're up and walking up and down the river, and I hear a sea lion, right? So we go down to the river to see if we can spot the sea lion, and I can't see a sea lion. But there's this big old fish leaping out of the water. Unusual, right? And I thought, it knows there's a sea lion around.
Yeah.
And then I see this wake moving across the river, right? This ominous wake just moving across the river. And I knew, nothing could be doing that except the sea lion. And then a few minutes later, there was like a stillness. And then the sea lion pops up with this fish in its mouth, right? And yet another
Wow.
reminder, right? The fish was just going about its business. It's been here on this planet for a while, enough to get real big.
Yeah.
It was just swimming around, and then all of a sudden, here comes
Gone.
right? And it's always a little bit better when the mishap is somebody else's rather than my own. Because, well, mainly because I can see it quicker, right? when it's my
Totally,
own,
yeah.
it takes me a minute because first I have to, shoot myself with a few ancillary arrows, uh, just because that's what I got to do. And
Yep.
then I can sort of be like, oh, right, I don't want to be doing that. Remember.
Right, right, for sure. Can I share? I'll share kind of a silly one. So, um, Monday night, or no, it was Sunday night. I was so exhausted. I went to a dance workshop that day, and it was just a lot of movement and a lot of being close to other humans like all day. It was a lot for me. And I was really exhausted, and so I went to bed early. Um, but unfortunately, because I went to bed early, I didn't have enough time to attend to my cat in the way that he normally would want me to, especially on like a weekend when I'm supposed to be home and spending more time with him. And so for like the first 2 hours of me trying to fall asleep, every time I was like drifting to sleep, he would suddenly start howling. It honestly, it was like psychological torture because it was for like 2 straight hours that this was happening. And then after that, he would jump on me, jump down, jump on me. That was a little bit better, more easy to do. But in those times where it was like I would be woken up, um, I would have this kind of surge of like adrenaline and anxiety and like anger at my
Yeah.
cat,
Oh,
like,
yeah. Oh, I
oh my
know.
God.
Every cat owner knows, Jack.
Right. And for, whatever reason, somehow it came to me like, hey, no, this is it. Like this is the moment when I'm supposed to train, right? Like my cat
Yeah.
doesn't know I mean, he does know better. Let's just say he does know better. But even then, with him intentionally waking me up, right? He's suffering, right? And so can I have some kindness for him? Well, and you know what? I'm gonna take this as an opportunity to say some Tara mantras for myself, for
Oh,
James, for other people who are going through something similar with
yeah.
their cats waking them up,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Um, and so, it's kind of that like, okay, turn the mind towards the Dharma, right? Like, I don't need to panic about this in my sleep and whatever.
Right.
Ultimately, it's not a big deal. So it was just like a little funny way that I tried to turn my mind
How do they
to joy.
know? How do
How do they
they are
know?
expert psychological torturers, right?
It's incredible.
It's at just that right. Like they don't do it like if they did it rhythmically, like at a certain pattern or something, we could deal with that. But no, it's this like they just wait until you're in that right about to, everything's about okay, and then
It's so rude. It's
it's
so rude. Little jerks.
they
I
are.
still love
I
them.
I'm glad to hear you're doing the practice there. What I like to do. This is how I
Yeah.
use cats and other beings that make noises and such. How
Yeah.
I've used them. Um, what I sort of ask myself when I hear a noise that like a recurring cat meow like that I like is driving me crazy and I know isn't gonna like I'm not gonna do the thing the cat wants me to do. And so I
Right.
know it's gonna continue for a while, right?
Yeah.
And so what I do is I will just sort of like focus on that sound when it happens, right? And I'll try
Yeah.
to notice like is it actually one taste, right? Are these mental phenomena sort of are they the same, right? So I'll
Ah,
compare it. I'll be like, all right, so there's the cat yowling. Oh, a car just went by. And I'll be like, well, why is, like there's no difference. If I actually am looking at the sound, there's no difference.
yeah.
And then I can hear all
Yeah.
kinds of sounds and I notice there's actually no real difference there, right?
Yeah. I think the difference for me is that I'm taking it personally, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, of
Yeah, that's the difference,
right.
right?
Oh no, I know what that's exactly it. And so then it begs the question that, oh, when I can see that the sense itself is sort of neutral, right? There's nothing wrong with it. Cats can yowl all day long, but no, it's because it's personal.
Right. That's hilarious. Yeah. More cats. We should have a show on cats.
We should. We
That'd be
should.
fun.
How cats are our good friends and teachers.
Right. Certainly. This is beautiful. This just say Bodhisattva of compassion.
Yeah,
Um,
Avalokiteshvara right there.
and it's ivory, huh? Wow,
It
gorgeous.
is. Yeah. Uh,
Wow,
I like the lotus on his shoulder. That's good.
very cool. Hmm. Yeah,
Well,
definitely check this out for folks who are listening. Take a look at the Lions Road Dharma Center's slogan generator. There's always a incredible piece of art
and
with each one.
if you're currently looking at the screen and you're enjoying this beautiful work of art, that right there is the suffering of change. Where I just said,
Ah,
just
say
wanna,
more, say
you
more.
were having a good time looking at the image and then it just went away.
And then it just went away.
It's gone.
Yeah,
No fault of your own. It's just
no
gone.
fault of your own. That's right. So the suffering of change, I wanted to talk about this one tonight just because as you were saying in the beginning, it's so pervasive. Like if I'm really looking at my everyday life, the suffering of change is something that I really, really struggle with. And I can talk a little bit about where that shows up. But the suffering of change is part of the three types of suffering. And there's the suffering of suffering, right? Dukkha dukkha, and that's like the very obvious kind of like physical and emotional discomfort and pain. Um, and there's also the suffering of existence itself, the suffering of samsara. And then there's the suffering of change. Um, and classically, that's like, where we have an attachment for something. Maybe we could use the example of like chocolate cake or whatever. We're excited to eat the chocolate cake. Um, and uh, then what happens is that we eat it and it's gone, right? That in itself is the suffering of change because the enjoyment doesn't last, right? Um, then there's also the suffering of how those things that we think are to bring us happiness, those things that we are attached to, um, ultimately, even if we multiply it, it doesn't bring us more happiness, and in fact brings us more suffering. So in the metaphor of the chocolate cake, if you continue to eat chocolate cake, you're gonna get sick. you're gonna you're gonna have some immediate illness and then maybe some longer term illness, right? If you continue eating that way. So that's really the suffering of change, is like our attachments, the things that we think are going to bring us happiness, do not. They leave us, and or they become dukkha dukkha, that suffering of suffering. Um, so I was just feeling that today, recently, because I've noticed like when I'm in dukkha dukkha, like suffering of suffering, like I'm kind of like having a lot of aversion to the political climate and things that are happening there, then I go to a lot of attachment where I get like I have a sweet tooth right now where I'm like, I'm eating candy
Hmm.
at work, I'm having a bunch of fruit, like all that kind
Huh.
of thing. And so that's kind of like the suffering of change for me, right? Is where I'm like kind of this addictive quality of those things that give me like momentary pleasure, but that ultimately in this case with sugar like kind of leave me tired at the end of the
Oh
day
yeah.
or throughout the day, right?
Hmm.
um and yeah, so longer term effects could happen as well if that continues, but so it's been just coming up for me in that way. It's interesting.
Wow, I didn't realize there was something in the water. I
Yeah.
had this experience just the other day. I was was like I was grocery shopping and bought ended up buying like a little container of like where I don't know, in like the deli section where they had like malted milk balls, right? Chocolate covered malted milk. You know what I'm talking
I
about?
know him. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like Whoppers or whatever.
Hoppers.
Anyway, so they had these, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get that. And then I I ate a couple of them and I was like, oh, that brings me back to my childhood, and oh, it's so pleasant, it's so nice. That's good. And then I was like, oh, a couple more. Wow, wow. Okay, okay, that's still good, but it wasn't as good as the first bite. And then
Uh-huh.
I like at one point I was like, no, 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 I'm straight up not having a good time. I don't want, no,
Yeah.
thank you. Please don't put
Please get
another
away
one.
from me.
But now I was sort of like disappointed with myself for even having purchased them in the first place, because I was like, well, but you knew this was going to happen. You knew the Whoppers weren't going to satisfy you. You knew you were going to try to eat too many of them. You knew you were going to feel guilty about doing this and that you shouldn't have done it. And you're going to feel
Should.
all of this stuff, right? Oh man, that was samsara, right? Right there.
Yeah.
The entire thing was just so samsaric, and it was exactly what you described. It's this like, oh, it's so, oh, like the good feeling before the good thing even shows up, like you're anticipating it and you're like, oh, the good thing's coming, the good thing's coming, and then
Yeah.
it's here and you're like, woo, it's here. Then you're like,
Yeah.
you get it, and then it starts going downhill,
It
right?
starts going downhill the second you get it. Yeah, that's why Starbucks puts on their cups, like that first sip feeling. Have you seen that?
No.
Yeah. So when you get a Starbucks on their little disposable cup, it says that first sip feeling, dot, dot, dot. And that's exactly what it is, right? Where it's like, yeah, the first sip might be pretty good. And then from there, it's not so good anymore.
That's right. That's
But
right.
they hook you, right? They get
Oh
you with
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They know
We
how
get
this
ourselves with
works.
that.
Right, for sure. Well, and it's interesting. I was thinking about how the suffering of suffering is related to the suffering of change in the sense that it's like this sort of yin and yang, right? Where
Yeah.
so the way that the sutras describe the suffering of suffering says, what is the suffering upon suffering? It is that which is painful when arising, painful when remaining, and pleasant when changing, right? So when we go from this state where we're like, oh, things are not okay. I've got a headache and my body aches or whatever. Okay, nothing about that's good. That's like suffering of suffering, right? We have disease. And then like we get health and we're like, oh wow, good health. Like this is really
Yeah.
nice. Oh, it feels so good. Yeah. And
Not
right
sick
then,
anymore.
now we're about to undergo the suffering of change, right? So we get like the suffering of suffering, and then we do something, and then it leads to the suffering of change, and then it's more suffering of suffering, and it's just this bouncing up and down, up and down.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. This kind of yin
It's
and
a
yang.
perpetual engine. It's a perpetual source of energy driving all of humanity.
Right. Yeah, we see it everywhere, huh? We can't
It seems
escape
to
it.
me like the energy of movement, right? Like, why the hell are people moving around? Well, they're moving towards something that they want or away from something they don't want.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. It all makes sense,
it
right?
all
There,
makes
and
sense.
it's easy, so much easier to have compassion when you see it that way, right? Where it's like, oh, we're just going back and forth, thinking that we can get some ground, right? And we're just flailing. I heard someone mention this image of like a bucket of crabs, where it's like if you're a crab on top, right, you're feeling pretty good. Like it can kind of like you feel like you're on top, you're gonna get out, right? But underneath you, it's just this churning of other crabs that eventually you're gonna get pushed under, right? And
Yeah.
it's like this just kind of suffering, a continuous suffering of feeling like you're on top and then getting sucked
Bucket of
under again.
crabs.
And then, yeah,
Oh my God. Okay, so when next time somebody asks me and I happen to be in this state of samsaric suffering and they say, how you doing? I'm gonna say it's just a bucket of crabs, man.
it's
I'm
just
just
a bucket of
I'm just a
crabs.
crab in a bucket of crabs. Oh,
No matter where I am in the bucket, there's gonna be some suffering for sure.
yeah, so but what the
Um,
hell? What I mean, okay, all right, fair enough. So we all know what we're talking about here, right? Like, all right, when good things go away, it sucks. But what about
yeah,
the fact that it sucks while you have it as well, that it's going to go away?
yeah, and we know it, right?
We
Or
know it. Think
part of
about like
us
when we were
knows
talking
it.
about the God realms, right? like the they don't get to experience a lot of suffering, right? That's actually one of
Right.
the wonderful things about the God realms is there's not a lot of just sort of pain, involved in that existence. But then when it changes, as all conditioned phenomena do,
Yeah.
then they get to experience a type of suffering that is immense and terrible,
Immense.
right? Like it's awful. And that, what they're experiencing during that change at the end of their life is the suffering of change.
Yeah. Right. Right. And I think that's like, if we're thinking of like kind of a realm as like a metaphor for what we're experiencing, like uh it's the super attachment realm, right? Because they're just getting everything that they want, just like constant pleasure, not having to worry about anything. Um, and so it's like this brief for us, it's this brief moment of like, wow, just fully absorbed, and then like the second something starts shifting and it starts getting for the gods, there's this element of like, oh, they start smelling nasty, right? Their clothes start getting dirty. Everything's becoming opposite of what it was. And for me, like when I think of that in my experience, it's like this feeling that if I just hold on to it longer, it'll change back, right? It'll go back to what it was. It would go back to the pleasure and
Yeah.
not this what it's turning into, which is just like, oh God, get away from me, this like nasty thing. Um, so yeah, I love that thinking about those the poor gods and what they have to go
Oh my
through at the
God, you
end
just
of it.
reminded me of some of my younger relationships where
Oh, me too.
where we'd be together, everything's like all fine, and then we're like, oh no, it's not fine. We got to break up. And then it's like, oh no, this isn't okay. Like maybe we could go back to the good feelings that we had if only we this, and then you get back together, and then you're like, no, but that's not the same as it was in the past. Oh no. Ah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. No, I was thinking the same thing, relationships.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's
I mean, I definitely, as a parent, I experienced this suffering of change with my children in
mm,
some really profound ways, right? I do have that, the one where like they're here right now and they're healthy and everything's fine, but I'm aware, like I'm like aware of that sometimes cars come flying out of,
mm,
running red lights and crash into other cars and bad things happen. So like there's that sort of like, oh God, like what if like what if they,
totally.
some terrible thing happens to them or whatever? Like there's that kind of thing, which is like a preemptive suffering of change, right? It hasn't even happened yet, and I'm already sort of suffering it. But then there's also
Right, right,
just that, these like especially in their teenage years now, like who they are and how they relate to me. Like I know they love me and stuff, but they're interested in other people and other things and
right.
going places and doing stuff, and it doesn't involve me, right? And I'm like, but what you're leaving me behind. No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is so much that way. Yeah, that our loved ones are changing in
They're
front of our
changing.
eyes.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Oh, so how do how are you coping with that suffering of change in you know, your family relationships?
Um, by not turning away from it,
Yeah.
I actually embrace it. I think, like I really embrace it in terms of like sitting with it. Right? So like I kind of just like instead of turning away, so impermanence sort of is the issue, right? And my ignorance of impermanence, I haven't really realized it. That's the kind of the problem there. That's the rub. And so when I sit with it a little bit longer and I really try to pay it, that's one area where I will do some visualization or attempt to,
Mm,
right? Like really imagining, how it is changing and how it will continue to change that way and just staying with it, like continue to look at it, keep looking at it. And what happens is like something really, what feels sort of heavy, right? So this suffering of change is a heavy feeling.
yeah.
What happens is when I don't turn away and I keep looking at it and sitting with it, being with it, is that heaviness gives rise to like a very tender, soft, warm heart. And I remember like that's right. Like it's really important to me. It's really important to me to be engaged and to be with them when I'm with them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it adds a sweet, it's like a bitter sweetness to it, you know? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think, not turning away from it, really being with it, I think is really helpful. At some point it relaxes. This incredible tightness surrounding this changing stuff, like it just kind of relaxes.
Mm, yeah.
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 How do you deal with it?
Um, I think so. What I've been trying to notice, and this is with this stuff, maybe not necessarily relationships, but I can talk about that too. But for things like more sense pleasures, like overindulging in food, um, stuff like that, or like, wanting to veg out and just watch TV or something. Um, it's important for me to like kind of become automatically suspicious of that mind that is like saying to myself that that's going to bring me happiness. And so anything that's like not kind of my training that I'm like, ooh, this is, there's just that little part of my mind. I have this little voice in there that's like, yeah, do that, indulge, like do that, all day, all night, right? It really wants me to go there. Um, and I do. It's not like I don't indulge at times, um, or that I think it's always terrible or something. But yeah, it's like to become suspicious of that little voice. You're like, oh, you know, I see you're there. Okay. Yeah, that does sound nice, but do I really need all of that right now? Maybe not. you know. So just that's helpful for me is to kind of I guess it's just becoming more aware of my own internal states, right? Becoming more mindful and like being able to map, okay, that's that little voice. And I don't need to trust it. um
Mm.
so I don't know if that feels relevant for you, but that's kind of helpful for me.
It's like you're heading it off sort of at the past, like you're like, hey, don't even start developing, don't even start moving towards attachment in this case, right?
Yeah, like don't even get that uh karma going, right? That kind of like momentum. Um because
Right.
I was reminded recently about how like, karma, one of the kind of factors of karma is that it grows like over time. So even like a little seed, right? It's going to become a big old tree. So same thing with karma, like something small can set off this whole like momentous trail, right? That can just get longer and longer and longer, and bigger and bigger. And so that can help. That's a little bit of a a dampening on the kind of like attachment like that. Um, though the one that I haven't been able to do that with is sleeping in. Like when I'm in the mode of like when I want to snooze my alarm, something like that, where I might remind myself like, hey, like karma momentum, like maybe it'd be good to get up and meditate. I just freaking snooze. Like I have not I have not been able to overcome the little voice that really wants me to sleep in. Um,
Interesting.
isn't that funny?
Interesting.
Sometimes I'll just pop up. There's not like the dialogue, but if I get the dialogue going in my mind, about like, well, do you want to sleep in? Then I'm like, yes, I
Yes,
do.
I do. I would very much like to sleep in right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, even there, like the question, do I want to engage in mind training rather than asking, do I want to sleep in? Because, the answer to the other question is also yes.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it's
no,
funny
that's
because
good.
even in the question, there's a hint at the answer. right?
Yeah.
Even if the
Yeah.
question that is being asked in the first place sort of points to something.
That's a great point. Yeah, maybe I've got to be asking different questions. Huh?
I think that, yeah, that's where one, I don't know about this, the sleep thing, but the sort of what, like what you were saying about the kind of heading it off at the pass, like
Yeah.
not trusting itself, right? Or the notion. I think that's I don't know if I can say it in quite the same way. I don't know if I can use the word distrust in there, but there is this sort of sense, like I can remember, like, oh, right, I just like I'll be in, like what'll happen is like there's all of a sudden there'll be like appear sort of this other thing, whatever it is. Let's just say, mm, I love chocolate peanut butter ice cream, right?
Yeah.
And what'll
Me
happen
too.
is, let's say, like, I'm just, things are hunky, like, things are okay, or whatever, regular sort of dissatisfaction or just ordinary life. And then, like, a thought, there's a million gazillion thoughts that appear in mind all the time, right? But the thought of chocolate peanut butter ice cream will appear. And what's really interesting is, like, in the past that would have led to like I should or should not, should I do this, should I not do this, and there I had both aversion and attachment. I had this sort of like yes, no, yes, no, and I was
Yeah.
stuck in this binary, it's like am I gonna, and like your sleeping thing, as soon as
Yeah.
they do that, the answer was already there, you see.
Yeah.
Like the fact that I I'm asking myself or I'm arguing, I've already lost. It's like the alcoholics say, right? If you're debating with
Totally.
yourself about whether you should or should not drink, you've already lost,
Yeah.
right? And it's that same, what I realize is that I have taken a thought and reified it. Now I'm like, oh yes, chocolate peanut butter ice cream. It's real. Now I'm like, now I can visualize. Like I couldn't visualize Shakyamuni
Right.
Buddha, but I can visualize a bowl of
Oh,
chocolate
yeah.
butter ice
You
cream. No
can
problem.
taste it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Smell
exactly.
it.
I
Yeah.
can picture myself. I can be like, oh, it's not in the freezer, so I can picture myself driving to the store. And I can picture myself, getting it.
Yeah.
I can get all excited about it, right? And that's the freaking ignorance, right? That's
Yeah.
that link, that first I something that wasn't tangible, right? In any real sort of sense. Just the thought. I have all kinds of thoughts, but this one for some reason captured my attention. God damn, I gotta have a bowl of peanut butter chocolate ice
Yeah.
cream, right? And
Yeah.
then it stirs up all this stuff, and then there's movement based on that, right?
Right.
But if I hadn't conceptualized me versus chocolate peanut butter ice cream in the first place, if I had, and I have been getting some practice, I'm grateful. I love that I'm getting some practice with this. Now I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I see. It's just like all the other thoughts when I'm meditating.
Right.
It's just a, it, it's just like the cat yowling at the door. Like
Yeah.
it's just a thing, right? It's no different than all the other thoughts, right? I had some thoughts about Dharma, I had some thoughts about, my friends, I had thoughts about my kids, all
Yeah.
good, right? It's all wonderful. I didn't go, I didn't have to like, it didn't require that I engage or do something about it.
Right. Right. That's great. I mean, yeah, that the antidote of equanimity, right? That
Equanimity.
it's like, oh, this is just any other thought. I don't need to follow it. I just really don't.
I could if I wanted to.
What if I wanted to? Yeah, but do I
Right.
really
I mean,
want to? Yeah.
I want to be able to use thoughts when I want to use thoughts, right?
Yeah.
If that's helpful, then thoughts, good, fantastic. But much of the time I can see it, I'm like, well, that's not even like a helpful seed to be planting.
Right. Yeah. The chocolate peanut butter seed.
Do,
Not very helpful.
I don't even like I mean I want I don't want to like banish chocolate peanut butter seeds from my kingdom. You know what I mean? But
Totally.
I do want the possibility of chocolate peanut butter ice cream to exist.
Yeah.
But I want it to happen in this life in a way that is helpful, that's skillful, right?
Yeah.
Isn't
Yeah.
going to increase my suffering. And you know how I do that with the chocolate peanut butter ice cream? I got to tell you this freaking beautiful
I want to
experience.
hear it.
Okay. Normally, I'm my dad's child. I'll take a bunch of I'm gonna eat it all, and then as soon as it's done, I'm like, oh, maybe I need a little more, like super greedy, like total piggy, right? When it comes to chocolate peanut butter ice cream, right? So the other day, I was like, oh, there's some in the freezer, and I was like, but I don't. I recognize that I don't want to like be pigging out right now and that it's not helpful to me. My body doesn't need it. It's actually punishing me. It's there's like you were
Mm,
talking about, like this is not it's not healthy. It's not good for my mind or my body. And then I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna actually try to do something that I heard Lama talking about before. I'm gonna try to emulate my teacher. He said it. He was talking about it in relation to a choc or an almond croissant. About he said, can I take just a piece of the almond croissant, and can I visualize it as massive and huge and satisfying, so much that I can share it with everyone. I can give it away, right? And I can offer it to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and every can I use tantric practices in a way to like
mm,
to do something with this almond croissant. And I remember him telling this story and I was like, I'm gonna try this with this peanut butter chocolate ice cream. So I took just a tiny little, like a tablespoon of it, right?
yeah.
I sat outside and I very intentional. I was very mindful with it, looking at it, smelling it, considering it, and then I started doing these visualizations with it. Oh my God, it was awesome. I hadn't even touched it yet, and all the way through to the very end, right? Like I was so aware that this was the last bite, that this was the last moment the spoon would be touching my lip, and all of this stuff, right? It was a gorgeous, deeply satisfying experience. I could have eaten a gallon of chocolate peanut butter ice cream, and I would not have been 1/10 as satisfied as I was with that tablespoon.
Yeah. Ooh, that sounds delightful.
It was delightful.
So sensual.
So, oh my God, you don't even know the half of it, Jack.
Yeah.
We'd have to
Okay,
change
so
the
that's
rating on this
great.
show if I described it.
But isn't that lovely how like the Dharma always when we like go towards the Dharma, that's when we actually get what we want, not just like we get what we want right in terms of like we're developing our minds and we also get the pleasures of this life
That's
too.
right.
That's
Yeah,
like the weird thing. It's like paradoxical,
it is.
but like we actually get it and we get it in a way that's not going to make us sick, right?
Hmm.
It's balance. Like you just got to enjoy it for what it
Yeah,
was, this little
yeah,
ephemeral delight.
totally.
And
And
it's
when it
not
was
going to make
gone,
you sick.
yeah, no, beautiful.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I
Mhm.
that's inspiring to me.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Well, I'm happy to be on this Dharma journey with you. I'm so
Me too.
happy that we're on this path together and that we get to talk about it.
Yeah, it helps me so much. I really
Same, Jack.
appreciate
Every
you.
time, every time.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you get a chance, please make a donation on the Lions Road Dharma Center website. And otherwise, we'll see you next week.
Have a good night, Jack, and I'll talk to everybody later. Bye.
Daniel. Bye.